Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Monday Moments with Moon. I'm Moon here and I am on the Parkour Easy Jumps on Hypixel Housing that is owned by Exo. Yeah, it's in the corner. And today we're going to be talking about, well, something that's kind of close to my heart as an English major, which is literary reviews. So without further ado, let's get into it. So recently, I've been faced with a new way of looking at literature that has honestly been around for years, but as it isn't a method I ever thought to use, I never really dealt with it. But as an English major, the past 3 years I've been exposed more and more to this modern view of literature, and today I want to talk about some of my thoughts about said view. To start off with, these modern literary theories I'm talking about are the race, gender, sexuality, and disability theories that have been dominating the field since around the mid-20th century. I want to start off by stating that these theories do have the potential to do a lot of good. They open the door for more diverse writers to be given the chance for their stories to be read, and they open the eyes of many people to injustices going on in society. I would even go so far to say they add a great depth to the reading experience, as it allows you to read stories from points of views different from your own. But, just as with all good things, there are some dangers with these theories, and it's those dangers that I want to talk to you guys about today. The biggest issue I find with these literary studies, and the issue that I plan to dedicate this video to, is the fact that I feel like these literary studies have lost sight of what is most important about literature and the analyzing of it, which to me is the stories themselves and the reader's relationship with those stories. To really dive into this, I feel I have to give a background into what these modern literary studies do differently from the ones of the past. With the introduction of race studies around the 1960s, a new way of looking at literature was created, in which a person looks at a story with a theory or idea already in mind. This is different from previous studies, which focus more on reading the book first and creating your ideas based on what you read, or reading a book with some background information in mind. So now, instead of picking up a book and looking for its meaning, you pick up a book and try to find your own meaning inside of it. And that is when things get dangerous. When you start looking for meanings an author never intended to be there, even at the cost of the book or the author's reputation, you start dismissing obvious factors just to make a point. An example that I want to use is the Little House on the Prairie books. Recently, they've been under attack because of the supposed negative point of view in which Native Americans are being portrayed. People are so upset by this that they want the books banned from school and even discontinued a literary award that was named after Laura Ingalls. But this just shows how this method of reading can so easily get out of hand. People are so focused on the race view that they miss the historical one, or even the genre in which the book was written. These stories was a diary of sorts. It was a biography of Ingalls' life. She was simply writing what happened and how she felt about it at the time. Natives had come into her house, and that was a scary thing for a little girl. Also, in the time in which Laura was writing, her stories would have been considered to have a very positive view of natives. She writes of how her family moved off the natives' lands because they realized what they were doing was wrong, and how her interaction with the natives, while they terrified her, were mostly positive. She wrote during and of a time when stories of natives killing new settlers in the area were prevalent, so of course those stories are going to affect how she felt seeing a native walk into her house. And don't lie, you would have been just as terrified as her. This is one of the biggest things I think these new literary studies forget about, not as the historical timing of certain writings, or even the historical value of certain pieces. Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn is a very racist book by today's standards, but by the standards of his time, they were quite the opposite. They were scandalous because of the positive light in which they viewed slaves. How dare Twain compare a slave to a white boy of lower-class society? What an idea that slaves and lower-class whites are both groups that have the potential that is being wasted. This is an idea that is lost when taking the story out of the time period in which the story was written, which was only a few decades after the end of the Civil War. And while I love the idea of our reading list containing more works from minority groups throughout history, we should never use them to discredit the authors and histories whose writings are worth reading simply because they were what was read during a specific time period. In modern day, lots of different voices take the stage, and I love that. I think the literary world is way better because of it. But we need to accept that in the past, it was white male authors who were read and whose writings were allowed to shape society. Yes, let's find those smaller voices throughout history that also deserve to be heard, but let's not bash those other authors simply because they were white, rich men. And, well, most of them weren't even really rich, so just white men. Or worse, bash people in today's time for enjoying these books that were written by these dead white male authors. Finally, we need to remember that when using these literary studies, that people tend to write about what they know. Not every work of literature is going to be able to break every stereotype of every people group, and they especially will not be able to write every culture into a story, especially if the author has no experiences with said culture, and they shouldn't be expected to. These modern studies should be about looking at literature from a different point of view, not forcing writers to write according to your point of view, because that isn't how writing works. Writers write what they see, what they feel, what they think, what they hope for. They're the picture of our history and our desires for the future. I guess what I'm trying to say is let a writer just write and a reader just read. Feel free to read literature from a different culture or gender's point of view, but don't forget while you're doing that the author has their own timeline, their own gender, their own culture, their own point of view, their own life experiences. These studies should make you more open to different types of literature, so don't use it to close certain authors out. At the end of the day, I'm always going to pick the classic reader response mixed with historical literary studies while I read a book, because our modern world is already so complex and so full of people who are never content unless something is being criticized or even destroyed, that I feel these modern literary studies have become more of a hindrance to the goal of understanding our fellow humans, our history, and making the world a better, more inclusive place than they were ever a help. Next week, I hope to elaborate on this a bit more by talking about the banning of books and destruction of statues and why I disagree with it. And this is where I'm going to end it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and are looking forward to next week's video where we'll be following along in a similar theme. I also hope you guys have a beautiful and blessed day, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. Bye!